This is NC Spin, an unrehearsed discussion on issues of interest to North Carolinians. Now, here is your moderator, Tom Campbell.
Welcome. You've heard and read the spin the media and the politicians have put on the issues of the day. To get the correct spin on what's going on in North Carolina, let's introduce you to our panel of experts. We welcome to the show for the first time political analyst Greer Beaty, syndicated columnist John Hood, Chris Fitzsimon from NC Policy Watch, and former House Speaker Joe Mavretic. We've got an interesting show this week that begins by talking about the crossover deadline at the legislature. We'll talk about yet another abortion bill the legislature is considering, and we'll discuss a report that shows the median household income in North Carolina has declined every year since 2007. And as always, we'll ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Good show. Let's get started. It's been a most unusual and interesting legislative session to date, made all the more so by the last-minute flurry in both houses in order to meet the April 30th crossover deadline, the arbitrary date set by which any bill not passed by at least one house is dead for the session. I want to ask each of the panelists, in just a few words, give us your evaluation of this session so far and tell us what surprised you. Chris, I'll start with you.
Well, I think it may be because of the new House leadership, but there's an entirely different vibe or rhythm to this session. They're not the last few sessions, they've had really big things where everybody's been focused on them and then they move on to the next big thing. This thing, everything's sort of thrown into a stew. That there haven't been many bills passed both chambers, and that's a little unusual for when one party is, I think, controlling both chambers and sent it on to the governor. But so far, what's defined the session, I think, is the battle between the governor and the legislature, primarily the Senate leadership over incentives and historic tax credits and some other things. So I think we're less far along than we are normally at crossover deadline, and there's already talk of having another recess around 4th of July because they may not be finished until the fall.
Wow. Joe, what's impressed you?
Well, I think this has been an average session overall. If you look back over 15 or 20 years, I think 2015 is pretty much of an average session. They've done some good things. I think the House leadership pigeonholed the bill about gay rights, camouflaged ever how it was. I think that was a good move. But I can tell you, from an industrial recruiting, particularly the major automobile makers around the world, now we can say we have a cat of the state, and it's the bobcat, and come to North Carolina.
Greer Beaty, follow that. What's impressed you so far?
Well, I think what's been most interesting is really been how so many bills on so many varied topics have all been thrown in the mix at the same time. So there hasn't been as much attention paid to one single activity at a time. There's just a lot of different things moving all at once.
A lot of moving parts. John?
I think the phrase I would use is low-impact aerobics. There is music playing, there's activity, something's getting done, but there's no sprained ankles, much less any broken legs. I think for many people that's clearly an improvement. So what I would say about the session so far is I think that what the 2015 session will be defined by is not anything that has yet been acted on. I think it's still to come.
Chris, you wrote a column talking about they're passing stuff pretty quickly here, the latter part of the week, getting to this deadline. But you said that opposing voices weren't being heard, and sometimes even the state agencies were not being heard on some legislation. Is this really that much different from what we've seen over the past decade or so?
It's different. It's ebbs and flows. We've seen this, and Joe Mavretic knows this better than anybody else. In the early to mid '80s, it was terrible the way the legislature was run, and that's one of the reasons that I think Joe was able to put a coup together and take over the state house. I think things got better for a while, then they started getting bad again. Then the Republicans took over after promising things would get much better, and I think they've gotten bad again. We're going to talk about the abortion bill soon. That was a bill where we had a one-sided committee meeting. Only one side was allowed to speak, and there was a vote taken. They had doctors from all over the state coming to testify. They weren't allowed to. They passed a gun bill through committee, a very controversial bill. They had no outside comment. Nobody knew the bill was coming up. This is happening over and over and over, and you can say it happened before, but we criticized it as a group when it happened before and said it was wrong, and I'm disappointed that there aren't as many voices on the other side of the philosophical aisle, notwithstanding the people here, I mean in general around the state, who are complaining about it because it was wrong then, it's wrong now, and it's a terrible way to make laws.
Before they took the Easter break, John, they'd only passed like 13 bills into law. Why so slow? Is it just the newness?
I would describe that to wisdom, of course. Most bills are foolish and shouldn't be passed. I would certainly not rank the sessions on the basis of how many bills pass. I would go for quality over quantity. But Chris has got a really important point. A lot of times people think purely in the short run. It is in my interest in the short run on a bill that I'm interested in to just have my side speak, or to limit, not to telegraph what I'm about to do because it might queer the deal in the committee. That is the wrong decision, not just ethically, but it's the wrong decision in your own interest in the long run, because it ruins relationships. And remember, you treat somebody one way today, they might be in a position to treat you that way in the future.
We're going to be talking about some of these bills as time goes on and as they are considered by both houses. One of them I thought was interesting, Greer, was the concept of allowing hunting on Sunday. What do you think of that? Passed the House.
Well, but I don't understand why anyone's upset about it. There are hundreds of things that individuals and families do on Sunday that are not going to church. I mean, I think maybe we were a different people years ago, and we treated Sunday differently. I mean, I grew up the daughter of a bird hunter, and I spent a lot of time with my dad dove hunting and whatnot, and time's limited. If you can do it, you should.
One of the things that I thought was interesting was that the House passed a bill saying doctors don't have to be, because the doctors said they weren't going to be present for, and that's been one of the things that held up capital punishment executions. Now the doctors don't have to be present. How's that going to work?
Well, I think it's going to work very well. If you go back and look at what actually happened in Central Prison, the doctors weren't the people that were sticking the needles in the veins. It was people lower down on the pecking order. I think this is an interesting compromise, and that, to me, is one of the significant parts about it.
Is Leo Daughtry right? Is this going to start the executions back up, you think?
I think it has the potential to do that. Now, there's a checkmate there, and that's what's been found of people who were on death row and should never have been there in the first place.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure we'll be talking about more of them as time goes on. If you like NC Spin and you want more, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NC Spin on Facebook. We've got exclusive video footage you can't get anywhere else. Plus, you can read perspectives from opinion leaders across our state. Get more balanced debate from the Old North State on ncspin.com, NC Spin on Facebook, or at NC Spin Tweets. After these messages, we're going to talk about extending the waiting period.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Phones are getting smarter, cars more efficient, TVs bigger and more stunning. Imagine the same innovation from agriculture. Meet the Plant Sciences Initiative at NC State, a proposed state-of-the-art research complex where world-class researchers will tackle agriculture's toughest challenges, like feeding the world's rapidly growing population while preserving natural resources for future generations. Join Farm Bureau and NC State in moving North Carolina to the forefront of ag research in the world. Visit keepaggrowing.org.
The cost of everything has gone up dramatically over the last 75 years. With one exception, keeping electricity affordable. That's the power of your co-op membership. Learn more at togetherwesave.com.
North Carolina's Touchstone Energy Cooperatives, looking out for you.
Every year, North Carolina patients undergo 635,000 same-day surgeries. 72% of these surgeries are performed in our highest-cost hospital facilities, adding as much as $2,000 to every procedure. The state's outdated Certificate of Need law prevents competition from lower cost, higher quality same-day surgery centers, inflating healthcare costs and limiting patient choice. Tell state lawmakers it's time to lower healthcare costs now. It's time to make a simple fix to an outdated law, increasing patient choice and lowering healthcare costs now. You can help. Visit reformconnow.com and tell lawmakers it's time for a simple fix to an outdated law. It's time to lower healthcare costs now.
We now return to NC Spin.
One of the bills that made the crossover was one the House passed to extend the waiting period from 24 to 72 hours before a woman could have an abortion. Supporters of the bill say the extra 2 days shouldn't affect the woman and will allow more time to ensure she makes an informed decision. Opponents say this is just an extension of the Republican social agenda and further limits a woman's ability to have control over her own body. Greer, there were 4 Republican women legislators who co-sponsored this bill, but Representative Tricia Cotham from Mecklenburg County said abortion was an extremely personal decision, telling her own story, by the way, and declaring her womb and uterus were not up for the legislature's personal grab. What do you think about extending this waiting period?
Well, I'm not a fan of extending the waiting period, mainly because I think that by the time a woman makes the decision that she's not going to continue a pregnancy, I'm not really sure that the extra time is going to make her change her mind or her heart. And, you know, at that point, it is a little bit more of a burden on people who don't have resources to go back and forth, and women who have means can make their decisions in the way they want to. I think it's interesting you brought up the comparison between the two. The 4 Republican women and the Democratic woman. I mean, women are complicated and aren't just dominated by their biology, so it does not surprise me that you would have conflicting voices from women about this issue.
I think Greer's on to something. Also, when you think about this decision, it is the woman's decision, and I don't think this decision is arrived at quickly under any circumstances. I think a whole lot of thought goes into this decision, whether to continue or not, by every pregnant woman. And for the General Assembly to make some arbitrary decision about this extraordinarily personal issue, I think is a bad move.
John, originally the bill had a provision in it that prohibited UNC Chapel Hill and East Carolina med schools from actually performing abortions or teaching their med students to perform them. It was taken out before it was passed. Why? What was going on with that?
Well, this is an extension of policy at the federal level, the Hyde Amendment from long ago in Congress, and policies at the state level that limit and in some cases prohibit government involvement in abortion. So it's separate from whether abortion is going to be legal or not. Should public dollars be used for this? There was a debate for years and years about the state abortion fund and how large it should be and who should be eligible for it. And at the federal level, this recently held up the Attorney General nomination being confirmed, Loretta Lynch, because there was a related issue with federal funding going overseas and whether that was being used for abortion.
Chris, Representative Susan Martin from Wilson County was one of the 4 Republican co-sponsors of the bill. She said this was a bill to respect women and their choices, and there was nothing to prohibit their choices in this bill. If that's the case, then why have it?
Well, you have to ask them, because I think this is a bill is very disrespectful to women, and I agree with Joe. It really does presume that women make this decision on the fly and don't think about it, and the big General Assembly father or mother figure is going to say now, pat them on the head and say, now we need you to make sure you think about this because we don't think you've ever thought about it. I thought it was very insulting to women, and a lot of women stood up on the House floor and said that. And I think, you know, this whole thing started in 2000. The last 2 sessions ago, they passed, I guess, a 24-hour waiting period, and then they forced women to listen to a script prescribed by the state and view an ultrasound. The federal courts have thrown that part of it out. I think we'll see legislation about this.
Joe, here's an interesting point on this. Governor McCrory had said that he would veto any further abortion bills that came to his desk. How big a political issue is this potentially going to be for Pat McCrory, particularly as he's facing re-election in 2016?
Insignificant. This is raw meat to a very small part of the Republican base, and that's it.
All right, so Greer, the Senate is going to be dealing with this bill. We think it's going to pass over there?
I'm not sure, probably, but, you know, it is unfortunate that we collectively, the Royal, we don't spend our time thinking about what I think we all agree on, is that we really want all children conceived to be wanted and loved. Adding these waiting days is not going to make that happen.
All right, after these messages, we're going to talk about the median income falling in North Carolina.
NC Spin will return after these messages.
Where do you go when you need to know? ANC makes it easy for you to get the information you need to make well-informed public policy decisions. Our members are industry leaders who are ready to share their industry-specific insights with you. Want to hear both sides of the story? ANC members can tell you. Just use the ANC member directory as your guide or call us directly. ANC members have the knowledge, expertise, and perspective you need to create public policies that are good for North Carolina. We are ready for your call.
I was asked by someone months ago, isn't Medicaid in North Carolina broken? And my answer was no. There are parts of it that need to be improved. There are parts that need to be changed. But the whole system's not broken. There are a lot of things that are working very well. What is working well is that we have a physician-led, physician-guided team effort. It's built on the concept of physicians having medical homes, patients having medical homes. And that system that we've created in North Carolina has done wonderful work. It has saved money, it's improved quality, and we have data that demonstrates that. That's what we need to retain. That's what we need to build upon. We don't need to replace that.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes. OurNCHealthcare.com.
Does your North Carolina business or organization have a story to tell? I'm Richard Campbell, and at Carolina Broadcasting and Publishing, we help tell stories that connect you to the people who will respond. We take the time to understand our clients' needs and what makes them unique. We craft their stories through the efficient use of words, images, and videos that resonate with their desired audience. We also know that a good story is incomplete without a call to action. On video, on air, online, and in print, from concept to final production, no one can help tell your story more effectively or affordably than we can. For special introductory offers, visit carolinabroadcasting.com or call 919-832-1416. Again, that's carolinabroadcasting.com. Let us help tell your story today.
We now return to NC Spin.
With the exception of the top 5%, the median household income fell or remained unchanged from 2007 to 2013 and is effectively no different than it was in 1984. The average income of the median worker 16 and older dropped by more than 7% regardless of the education level. Even as unemployment rates have dropped, John Quinterno, author of the study, says claims of a Carolina comeback gloss over the deep problems with our labor market and household income levels and living standards. Joe Mavretic, you do a lot of studying of economic data. What's your reaction to this?
Well, I think the raw data that was used is pretty much on target. I think some of the conclusions I would question, and also there's clearly a bias. The bias has to do with what else you can do to make it better. Let's figure, you know, when you get down to the baseline, people in North Carolina who work trade their skilled time for money. We've said on this show many times that the purpose of a system of public education, public schools, community colleges, the university, is to graduate good citizens with the skills needed in a marketplace and the ability to enjoy life. Clearly, The educational system, which is the #1 business of North Carolina, is below average. The household income median, the median household income is below the national average. The individual median income is below the national average. The system that's supposed to produce good workers for North Carolina is producing below average workers.
Greer, one of the things that I think that this gets to is that the middle class, the middle income citizen in our state is really being squeezed here, and this shows this pretty graphically, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does, but I think you're definitely right, Speaker. I think that if you don't have the skills for the 21st century, then you're not going to attract the companies for the 21st century. You're not going to have the salaries. And then that leaves the middle class, the folks who don't have, aren't working in the park with PhDs or haven't inherited money, trying to figure out how to do the best they can with what's left.
John Mike Walden did an interview this past week, and he says that he's not ready to say that we're heading into another recession yet, but there's growing evidence that this year is definitely going to be less upbeat than we thought back in February. He says that a 24% decline in building permits and a 6% increase in jobless claims doesn't bode well. What are we going to need to do to stimulate this economy?
Well, remember, this is a national story. Just like with the median income issue, people grabbed on it, immediately started to make political hay about it, misunderstanding the nature of the data. With median income, for example, you have to be very careful using that statistic over decades because it is affected by things like divorce rates. Median households are not a static thing. They change in the size over time. You have to look at per capita income. But anyway, on the national economy in the first quarter, we had essentially no growth. It's very scary, and I think governors and legislatures across the country need to be saving money for a rainy day in case we're heading towards a recession.
But Walden was talking specifically about North Carolina. Governor McCrory, Chris, has been saying all along that this $3 billion bond referendum he wants to pass will produce jobs and put people to work. Is that one of the reasons why we should vote for it?
Well, I think it's part of the reason. The reason we need to vote for the transportation bond issue is that we have roads that need fixing and roads that need building. I'm still not sure he's made the case. I also applaud most of the infrastructure improvements. I'm not sure he's made the case as effectively for that in the General Assembly as he should. It's also worth noting, I'll go back to the larger question, the state domestic product or the state product, the state economic activity is actually up during the recession, but wages are down. So it's not, North Carolina workers are still working pretty hard, but a lot of the jobs that they're taking, a lot of the jobs that are being created are jobs at the lower end of the economic scale, which is why people are making less.
All right, after these messages, we're going to ask the panel to tell us something we don't know.
NC Spin is brought to you in part by the North Carolina Farm Bureau. The Farm Bureau and Agriculture. We keep North Carolina growing.
Hi, I'm Linda Loveland. I want the best for my kids. Feeding them foods they like within my budget is a priority. But what do we really know about these foods? North Carolina farmers and food experts give you a website to find it all. FeedTheDialogueNC.com, a place where moms like you and me can learn more about the foods we eat and the farmers that feed us. Check it out. Add your input and help feed the dialogue. Let's talk food at FeedTheDialogueNC.com.
Nobody ever imagined a mammogram machine being subject to CON law. If I want to invest our business dollars into technology that I think is going to benefit my patients, my customers, we should be able to do that. I think it's time to take a law that was intended to protect the citizens of North Carolina and now is harming them and change it. I'm Dr. Bruce Schroeder, and I support CON reform.
Visit reformconnow.com.
Medicaid system is not a perfect system. There are things that could be changed, but there's a lot that's going well with the system. Community Care of North Carolina is in place. It's a team of nurses, advisors, caregivers who help us out. We want to call and say, look, I've got Miss So-and-so here. She needs to have her weight checked each day because she's got congestive heart failure. Can you send one of those monitors out to the house and keep an eye on this and let me know if her weight goes up too much, because if it does, she's retaining fluid and she's going to be back in the hospital. We work together with them. It's a great system. It saves a lot of money. It's proven to work. We're not opposed to changing the things that need to be changed, but let's not throw out everything that we worked for the past 15 to 20 years.
North Carolina's Family Physicians supports Medicaid reform that builds on our state's foundation of medical homes.
OurNCHealthcare.com. We now return to NC Spin.
A lot of you see me on the street. You come up to me and you tell me one of my favorite parts of the show is when you ask the panel to tell us something we don't know. Joe Mavretic, start off with that.
Well, the Social Democratic agenda on assault weapons removal has been blown out of the water by the New York Times as simply a myth. And now what you're going to hear from the same group is a demand for universal background checks for weapon holders.
So you think the gun control issue is over?
It's not a gun control. This is always going to be
okay.
Gun control is going to be the issue. It's how you go about it. And the assault weapons problem was a myth. It actually created more assault weapons in the hands of Americans. And now that failed, the next move is universal background checks.
Chris, tell us something we don't know.
One of the things that we've seen, I think we all agree on, is the shrinking media and how unfortunate it is that people don't cover politics and politicians the way they used to. I was really struck this past weekend. Governor McCrory flew to Los Angeles, participated in a panel on Monday, which was, nobody knew about it, nobody knew he was going. The governor put out a press release, then the media covered the press release. Nobody reported except the LA Times that the governor was at a big soiree with the, Michael Milliken and Paula Abdul and all these people at this fancy food gourmet thing. And we have to read about it in the LA Times because our media doesn't have anybody that covers the governor full time.
Paula Abdul. John, tell us something we don't know.
Tom, we've had some more polls come out recently, statewide polls, and I keep an average of a rolling average of all the poll results. Right now, Pat McCrory and Barack Obama have exactly the same approval rating in North Carolina. The difference between the two is that both of them have 42% approval, but Pat's disapproval is about 42%, Obama's is about 52%.
Wow.
So that's the difference, but they both have a similar level of approval.
Okay. Well, so if I'm Pat McCrory, how does that make me feel?
You're not as famous as Barack Obama. That's really all it means.
Greer Beaty, tell us something we don't know.
I think that the Main Street Dems seem to be gaining a little momentum, and I think it'll be interesting to see what kind of influence they're going to have as the budget continues forward and Medicaid reform.
The Main Street Dems are more moderate and centrist.
They are. They are kind of middle of the road, moderate Democrats, and they've already had some influence in different places. So it's going to be interesting to see how they can leverage that as they move through this session, and if they can, where does that put them?
And how does it emerge?
Yeah.
Well, you've heard our spin on the issues of the day. To stay informed all during the week, give your feedback and read our column, be sure to visit our website, ncspin.com, or NCSpin on Facebook. We hope you'll join us next week when we'll have more balanced debate for the Old North State. Until then, stay informed and watch out for the spin.
Join us next week and get the spin on issues facing our state.